Are you a business leader with a growth mindset? Do you want to improve your marketing, your growth, and your business? Then welcome to the Pro Growth Marketing Podcast. My name is Dan, and my goal is to provide you with information and resources to help you make informed choices when it comes to growth, marketing, and achieving more in your business and your life. In today's episode, we have a special guest, Jon Macaskill. Jon Macaskill is a Navy SEAL commander turned mindfulness and meditation teacher. He's a Naval Academy graduate and has his master's in operations research from Naval Postgraduate School. Jon has served in Iraq, Afghanistan, off the coast of Somalia, and in Panama. He serves as the Deputy Executive Director for Veterans Path, a nonprofit organization that works to introduce meditation and mindfulness to veterans to bring them a sense of peace, acceptance, transformation, and honor. He also runs his own consulting company, Macaskill Consulting, LLC, bringing mindfulness and meditation to high-performing teams to aid in dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression, all while increasing focus, creativity, and productivity. Jon's wife also served in the Navy and is now a civilian orthopedic physician assistant in Virginia Beach. They are proud parents of 2 small children and currently live as a family in Chesapeake, Virginia. Jon, I'm pleased to welcome you to the show. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I'm happy to be here, and hopefully you can hear me okay. As I covered just before you hit the record button there, I'm sitting out on my front porch. My house, where I'm working from right now, as many people are, is kind of up in turmoil. We're moving soon, and we've got contractors doing all the last minute work prior to this actual sale of the house. So thanks for bearing with me as I sit on my porch, and hopefully the audio is okay.
Absolutely. I can hear you great. And I likewise, I hope the sound's okay on my end. And if you have any interruptions, it's because we're all dealing with uncertainty right now. I have 3 teenage girls at home that could interrupt me at any time. So we'll do the best.
We'll just roll with punches.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a great intro to today's episode, because today I definitely want to get into talking a little bit about how mindfulness can be a partner for people in business and dealing with crisis right now that we're in the midst of. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit more about you. And Jon, just tell us whatever you care to share, how you got to where you are today.
Sure, man. So it's not a terribly exciting story, but in my time in the teams, I very much enjoyed the work that I was doing, the people that I worked with, that I had the honor of serving beside. And with that, I also had some ups and downs, some stress, anxiety, and quite honestly, some depression that I was dealing with. And the Navy had me take different medications to address this. And they work to a point, and I still believe that there's a time and a place for those. But ultimately, I felt that the side effects were more than they were worth. So I came off of them, and I was talking with a psychologist. So I've got my friend across the street washing his car with a power washer. So I don't know if you're picking that up too. Hey, this is strictly organic, brother. No rehearsal.
Yeah, love it. Love it. That's what it's about.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, I ended up meeting with a psychologist who actually recommended mindfulness and meditation to me. And I at first kind of laughed at him and scoffed it off, and was like, whatever, I'll take that with a grain of salt and come back to my next session and see what he says. And next session, he said it again. I'm like, look, all right, man, I'm a 6'2", 220-pound, Navy SEAL. I kind of consider myself a tough guy, which I don't know, that was a false sense of bravado, but I consider myself that. And when he told me that I should practice mindfulness and meditation, I was like, look, I can't tell my guys that I'm practicing meditation. That's weak and kind of woo-woo. And then he finally convinced me by showing me this the sociology or physiology is what I'm trying to say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of practicing. And once I saw that, and I saw the very high performing individuals who practiced it, and then the data that he showed me, because as you mentioned in my intro, I'm an operations research guy, so data is big for me. Then I was like, okay, well, maybe there is something here. So I started practicing just very basic, using some of the apps that are out there. I used Insight Timer and Headspace. And then after a few months, started to see a change in how I was dealing with things, how I was feeling. And I was like, well, maybe this is just the placebo effect. Maybe I'm just thinking that I feel that way. And then I had people actually starting to come to me and asking me what I was doing differently. So that's when I knew that there was actually a change in how I was focusing, how I was focusing at work, how I was producing at work, how I was communicating with colleagues at work and with my family.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. So I kept on practicing, and then around the same time as I started to see the effects in myself, one of my mentors in the Navy, a retired SEAL captain, 06 type, he pulled me aside and he's like, hey, actually, you may have met him when you came to the Honor Foundation that evening, the CEO, Matt Stevens of the Honor Foundation. Yeah. He sat me down. He's like, hey, look, when you get out, or when you think about getting out, you need to backtrack about 2 years and start planning what it is you're going to do, figure out what industry it is you're going to go into, all this other stuff. And he's like, try to have 1,000 cups of coffee before you get out, as far as like with other people, not just sitting there by yourself, right? So that's why we took that 1,000 cups of coffee picture when we had that cup of coffee at Gather a few months back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, yeah. So I started meeting with different people in different industries, picking their brains about how they got into it, why they got into it. And all these industries are great. I think they're great work, but nothing was jumping out at me as something that I was passionate about. And then I was going home at night and meditating, or waking up in the morning and meditating, reading about meditation, reading about mindfulness, and then thinking, hey, what am I going to do for a living? And I was like, light bulb, it's right there in front of me. Let's see what I can do with this. And so I actually thought about creating a nonprofit that does what Veterans Path does. But luckily enough, I found Veterans Path and they found me. And that was a really long story to how I got to where I am. So yeah, that's it.
No, man, that's awesome. So yeah, you bring up a couple great points. I just talked to my friend Sean Douglas the other day in another episode, actually.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about was transformative moments, because like you, I struggled before I left the military with identifying where I wanted to be, but I knew I didn't want to be in government anymore necessarily. And so as a result, I'm in a completely different field. But so it sounds like you had that light bulb moment, that aha, yeah, that was like, you know what, I'm going to learn from this transformation in my own life and leverage that to the best of my ability, which is, I think, is superior. So what kind of practices, you say meditation and mindfulness, can you talk a little bit about what actually we're talking about?
Sure. So, a lot of the time, those two words are used synonymously, especially as they start to gain more traction in mainstream these days, but they're not actually the same. They're tied together. If you can picture a Venn diagram with two circles, one circle being meditation, one circle being mindfulness, and then the overlap between the two being mindful or mindfulness meditation. So there's many different forms of meditation, and not all of them are mindfulness. There's ways to practice mindfulness, and it's not all meditation. And then the overlap between the two is mindfulness meditation. So what is meditation? It's where you're being very intentional and setting aside time to actually be quiet, to be introspective, to be contemplative. Perhaps that's a mindfulness meditation where you're focusing on your sensations, where you're focusing on the here and the now, but it's not necessarily, because there are different types. So there's transcendental meditation, there's yoga nidra, There's many different types of meditation. And then mindfulness, you can be mindful throughout your day in your activities. You can eat mindfully. So if you're eating mindfully, you're paying attention to the smell of the food. You're paying attention to the sensation of the food in your mouth. You're focusing on the taste. And you're not just wolfing it down in between meetings. You're paying attention to it. You can drive mindfully. I mean, hopefully you're driving mindfully, paying attention to the other drivers on the street. But you can also literally turn off the radio, focusing on the sounds of the wheels rolling on the road, or the sensation of the seat against your back and your thighs, the back of your thighs. That's being mindful. So you're focusing on the here and now. And when you do that, you stop worrying about the past, stop worrying about the future, and it actually brings your stress level down. And then mindfulness meditation is the overlap again between the two, where you actually set aside some time intentionally to meditate, but you're focusing on the sensations in your body to bring you into the present moment. So again, it kind of washes away the past, or at least temporarily while you're doing the meditation, stops you from worrying about the future, focuses your brain. You kind of, the metaphor I like, and funny enough, my wife helped me with this recently, was come up with this metaphor. She just brought back some snow globes. And after I was like, man, I'm a genius. I came up with this great metaphor. And then I looked it up, and many people have used it. But it's like a snow globe, and your brain is like that snow globe after it's been shaken up, right? All those flakes are your thoughts, and they're all over the place, not making any sense. And if you set that snow globe down, that's kind of what meditation does, or mindfulness meditation does. You set that snow globe down and you let all that stuff settle. Well, that's what mindfulness meditation does. It helps your mind to settle and really calm down. And with that, there's so many physiological benefits. Like it can lower your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, really bring your tension down. You're tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system, so that allows your stress level to come down, which lowers your cortisol, lowers your adrenaline, and that's physiologically good for you. And it also helps to rewire your brain as your mind is bouncing around, whether it's in a meditation or just a mindfulness drill, and you come back to that mindful anchor, whether it's your breath, whether it's a sensation. That very action of noticing that your mind is bouncing around and then coming back to that anchor, that rewires your brain to respond rather than react to outside stimuli. So that's a little bit about what mindfulness and meditation are and the difference, and then the kind of overlap between the two.
And you focus on teaching the overlap as
Correct.
a regular practice.
Yeah, so I teach the overlap, and then I teach the mindfulness piece as well. So the mindfulness piece that you don't have to do, sitting down in like the lotus position, or not that you have to meditate in that position either. I mean, I personally, with what my body has been through, sitting in the lotus position is most likely never going to happen. So I was
going to ask about that.
I try to sit in a modified, like cross-legged position. And that only lasts about maybe 10 minutes, and then I have to get up, and I have like a cushion that I sit on that helps out with that. But yeah, the mindfulness part of that Venn diagram is what I teach, and then the overlap between the two, mindfulness meditations, that's what I teach. Well,
that's good. Well, and I can hear in that, I taught resiliency as part of the Army's program for a long time, and we would teach a technique that sounds very similar, and it was simply grounding to help people shift immediate mindset. But you're not talking about just immediate. You're talking about long-term benefits.
Yeah, well, there's both. You get the immediate by tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system and taking your deep belly breath in and then slowly breathing out. That actually taps into the parasympathetic nervous system, slows everything down. So that's your immediate benefit. But long-term benefits, yes, you get that by rewiring your brain. But actually, by practicing both meditation and mindfulness, you can increase the neuroplasticity of your brain. which allows for that rewiring to happen faster and allows for you to maintain that neuroplasticity in your brain into a more seasoned age.
Yeah.
So there's a great video on this on YouTube, and you may have seen it, Dan, where a guy he's an engineer, and he's challenged to ride a bicycle that's been re-engineered, where when you steer the steering column right, the wheel goes left and vice versa. I don't know if you've seen that, but for your listeners, I'll just cover it really quickly. You have been trained and your brain is wired to ride a bicycle a certain way. And when he gets on this bike, he thinks that he can just think through riding the bike just, backwards, the reverse way that you normally would, but you can't. And I've actually been on one of these bikes, and I thought I could beat it. And I rode it about 3 inches before falling. I have to send you a video or show it to you next time we're physically able to get together. It's hilarious, man. But anyway, he takes this challenge on himself. Hey, I'm going to learn how to ride this backwards bike. And eventually gets it. And the whole time he's riding this backwards bike or learning how to ride it, he's not riding a regular bike. So now he's rewired that neural pathway in his brain for what it takes to ride a bike. And now it's backwards from what everybody else has. And then he gets on a regular bike and he can't do it, even though he's grown up riding a regular bike his whole life. Eventually it clicks back and he's able to ride both. But what's really interesting is he has his son come on as well and ride a smaller version of the bike, and he picks it up much faster because that neuroplasticity is there at a younger age. But the whole reason I mention that is mindfulness and meditation helps to improve that neuroplasticity and helps you to rewire your brain, which is a big piece of what I want to get into here when we start talking about the resiliency. So I had to lay the foundation there. So sorry for the sidetrack.
No, I think it's great. And so let's just move right along, man. And so how then do you see this? And I think this is where you're trying to go, but you can steer me if you want to. How is then businesses right now, we're in the midst of a global crisis, not to use overplayed words, but business leaders are facing crisis. I just heard from a friend of mine this morning that he had to lay off 17 of his personal friends as a result of things that are happening. So how, let's talk about the resiliency piece. How can business leaders leverage these practices for, dealing with today and leveraging them for growth?
Sure. I think I'd recommend a couple of ways. One, personally, for the leaders themselves, is they practice what we've been referencing through the show, the mindfulness and meditation that helps to, again, develop that neuroplasticity and then rewire. But really where it helps to bring things like their stress level down is it physiologically shrinks the amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for fight or flight. And then it thickens the lining between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, and it actually thickens the lining of the prefrontal cortex, which makes that your default mechanism for responding to outside stresses. Your prefrontal cortex is responsible for cognitive thinking. And that is obviously what you want, so that you're responding instead of reacting. So if you're responding rather than reacting, you're going to be able to be more resilient. If you do that before you get into a stressful situation, you can be more resilient and handle it better. If you're doing it while you're going through a stressful situation, you're going to handle it better. Or if you do it after you've been through a stressful situation, you can actually respond better afterwards. So that helps to develop that resiliency at a personal level. As a leader in an organization, I recommend trying to get your organization to practice, again, what we've been discussing. So, if maybe you haven't laid anybody off yet. Maybe you know that it's coming. Maybe you know that some type of crisis is coming in your business, whether it's what we're going through right now or something that's coming down the road.
Sure.
If you give your people these tools, they're able to not only prepare themselves for a stress that's coming, but they're also going to make themselves better workers while they're there. So they're going to be more focused. They're going to be more creative. They're going to be more productive. They're going to be more communicative. So that will help them in the now while they're at work. Or if you've come to them and you said, hey, you know, Jack or Jane or whomever, we're gonna have to let you go at least for a short time while we're going through this pandemic. I mean, my wife has been furloughed, so it's hitting everyone.
Sure.
But if you come to them and you give them that news, one, if they've been prepared through mindfulness meditation, they're most likely going to handle it better. But if they haven't, and you maybe give them access to those tools or advice to access them, then they may handle the after effects better as well. So that's one way. And then the last way is that mindfulness and meditation also help to improve your empathy and your ability to be kind. So as a leader, if you're going to go lay someone off, you're going to want to be empathetic in that instance. I mean, you should be empathetic anyhow, all the time, as much as you can. But you're really going to want to know what that person is going through. You're really going to want to be able to feel what they're feeling as you're telling them that news and afterwards. And that's going to set you up to be a better leader, a better boss, and ultimately a better organization all around. So, and it's not, the empathy is not just important in laying somebody off. It's going to be important in leading an organization throughout. So that's, I believe those are why these tools are so important in this time. I mean, they're important, period, but that's why I think they're even more so during a time of this pandemic.
I think that's fascinating. I mean, because I talk about empathy from a marketing standpoint and being able to communicate well with people you're trying to sell to. Yeah. And I mean, I also recommend that, you express that same level of empathy internally in your organization, but being able to take that to the next level and apply it in a time of crisis, I can certainly see how that would be tremendously effective. So that's awesome. What do you then, you talk about incorporating these tools. Obviously, this isn't a one-time thing. We've established that.
Right.
You've practiced this. This is kind of the bulk of what you do with regards to Veterans Path, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. It's almost exclusively what Veterans Path does. So yeah, quick change of subject there, but yes, just to catch people up, Veterans Path. I know you mentioned in the intro, but that's a nonprofit teaching mindfulness and meditation to veterans, so that they can find a sense of peace, acceptance, transformation, and honor. And that's where the word path in our name comes from. And I am their deputy executive director. We too are in a pivot kind of right now, both in a strategic pivot that we had planned, and then we had to pivot to doing everything virtually online right now through Zoom and through one of our online partners, eMindful, with whom we're doing a webinar series starting next week with Congressman Tim Ryan, who's a mindfulness expert in Congress. He's a representative from Ohio. Anyway, we normally do in-person retreats where we teach mindfulness meditation in person. And obviously there's a lot more that goes on than just the meditation there. It's the community, the development with fellow veterans who may share some similar experiences. But we've had to pivot just like everyone else. So we're doing stuff on Zoom. We're doing this webinar starting next week with eMindful. Or I guess by the time this publishes, it will have started. So yeah, I'll send you the link on all that for your listeners to listen in. But yeah, what I do with Veterans Path, I'm their deputy executive director. So I work to raise funds. I work to raise awareness, brand awareness through social media. And then we've also got a podcast where I bring on either alums who have been through our program, or I bring on people who practice mindfulness meditation and can share how it has positively affected their lives. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing right now with Veterans Path.
Well, and I've heard some excellent conversations on that podcast. Stuff that
Thanks, man.
I mean, super educational and some impactful stories. So absolutely. And I'm curious. I'm sure. Well, I'm not positive, but I'm guessing that some of my listeners might be curious, especially from the veteran community. As a Navy SEAL commander, Obviously, you faced some stressful situations. Your teams have faced some stressful situations. Did you apply these tools to your, not, I don't know if "to" is the right word, but did you start teaching this to your teams? And how did you see, if you did, how did you see that impact them?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't have these tools until late in my career. I wish I'd had them on earlier on. I got them I learned about mindfulness and meditation and really started getting into it about 3 years ago. Yeah. And then I actually, I am a SEAL, but I left the SEAL community. I stayed in the Navy, but left the SEAL community and started working with what we call Big Navy, and I'm sure you call it Big Army, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So started working with Big Navy for a while, and I did teach my fellow Navy colleagues mindfulness and meditation, and I started to see them practicing on their own. Like I saw them, stopping for a second at the keyboard and taking some deep breaths, and kind of resetting. And we've gotten together many times since that I initially taught them, and we've discussed mindfulness and meditation at length. So I know that it is benefiting them, but as far as operationally, I never got a chance to use it beforehand. But I do know some guys in the teams do use it prior to going on operations, which is kind of counter to what you would imagine. Some people think that you get hyped up kind of like you do before a football game, before going on an operation. But really a better thing to do is to calm down and kind of reset your brain so that when you are out there, you're not hyped up. That's really the worst thing to do, is on the battlefield, feel all hyped up and not paying attention to what's going on, not paying attention to who's around you, not paying attention to all the communications that are coming in. You really got to be aware. You got to be paying attention to the situation. And that's just another word for mindfulness, situational awareness. So we've all practiced it in some sense on the battlefield, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that ability to stay focused is definitely, I can speak to that, right? If you are hyped up with that amped feeling and presence, it's not as easy to focus on the situation or even the task at hand.
Yeah.
And I know that there's plenty that's been shown on that too.
Right. And physiologically, I mean, what happens if you're super amped up, your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, your respiratory rate goes up, your pupils start dilating. I mean, everything that could possibly go wrong in order to address something right goes wrong. So why would you want to get amped up?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I appreciate you putting it so plainly for us and educating today. So
pleasure.
You recommend, obviously, people putting this into practice within their organizations or in their personal lives. I want to put you on the spot. And one, if people are considering how they can adopt these practices within their organization, what's the resource for them?
So different resources are out there. There are many resources out there now. I started very simply using some of the online apps that are out there. I started with Insight Timer and Headspace, and then I did Dan Harris's 10% Happier app, and then started working with Calm and eMindful. So those are some basic ways you can do it at the individual level. At the organizational level, there are people like myself that you can bring in to teach, and obviously in this day and age right now, a lot of that's virtual teaching to teach your organization. A lot of what we covered in this show today is teach them the physiology behind practicing, teach them the benefits behind practicing, and then teaching them the how and why. So that's how I recommend it for those who are looking into it.
How do you suggest people learn more about you or what you can bring to their organization? What's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, the ability to put this plug in really fast. Yeah. So for two things, for Veterans Path, you can find out more about Veterans Path at veteranspath.org. You can find us on all the social media. We are on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We do have that podcast, and it's just called Veterans Path. And then as far as my Macaskill Consulting, that's what you can find me under on LinkedIn, Macaskill Consulting LLC. That's MACASKILL. Or you can just find me on LinkedIn. I think that's actually how we connected originally. Dan was through LinkedIn, so it's just Jon, Jon, last name Macaskill, MACASKILL. I think there's actually two of us on LinkedIn. I'm the good-looking one. I'm just kidding. But obviously I'm the mindfulness teacher one. So that's me.
Perfect. That's awesome.
Hopefully the other Jon Macaskill doesn't listen to your show.
Well, hopefully he does. I mean,
yeah, hopefully he does.
But okay, so now here's where I put you on the spot.
Right.
If I'm navigating a tough situation right now, because a lot of people are, how do you feel about walking us through just a short one practice that we can apply ourselves right now to just start?
Oh yeah, I love that, man. Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna shift. Let's see here what this looks like. So yeah, I like this being put on the spot. That's pretty fun. So yeah, what we'll do is get into a position that's comfortable for you. However that is, you don't have to be sitting on a cushion. And again, you don't have to be sitting in a lotus position or cross-legged. I'm just sitting here on the chair, and what I'm going to do is scoot to the end, and I'm going to move my screen here just so it is an appropriate view.
Okay.
And basically what we're going to start with is just resetting and recalibrating your parasympathetic nervous system, and getting into that. You can do that very easily just by taking 3 deep belly breaths. So we want to breathe with our belly sitting up straight, kind of at the end of your seat, if that's how you want to be. And before we close our eyes, we're just going to take 3 deep belly breaths. Again, breathing with your belly, not with your chest. So just in through your nose, out through your mouth. And as you breathe out, try to think about doubling the amount of time that it takes to breathe out that it does to breathe in. Deep belly breath in. And last deep belly breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then if you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes or soften your gaze. Still start focusing on your breath as it comes into your nostrils. Notice how that feels. You don't have to control it. Just notice it. And then notice it as it's leaving through your mouth, how that feels crossing your lips. Think about where that breath is going when it comes into your nostrils, coming in through your nostrils, down into your lungs, expanding your belly, expanding your chest, and then reverse it. Coming out from your lungs, belly and chest contract and fall, and comes out of your mouth a little bit warmer than how it came into your nostrils. One last cleansing breath in through your nose. Slowly, softly out through your mouth. When you're ready, open your eyes or lift your gaze. Gently move around a little bit, bring some movement back into your body. It's as easy as that. Reset. It doesn't have to be drawn out. 15 minutes can be something as simple as that to reset how you're feeling about things, how you're thinking. I'm sure that you hopefully felt a little bit calmer after doing that.
Yeah, that was great. And I think a great walkthrough, Jon. I appreciate
Awesome.
that.
My pleasure. Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope it's beneficial to our listeners or to someone that needs it today. So you talked, as we wrap up here, you talked a little bit about eMindful and the webinar. We're going to make sure that the link to that gets posted as soon as it's available. So that'll
yeah,
be
thank you. That'd be great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot today. I hope that it was beneficial to others. Is there any final thoughts or anything you wanted to add that I missed?
Yeah.
Maybe, or?
Yeah, last thing is something I've said. I think we share a mutual friend in John Hawley. I believe you're friends with him, at least via LinkedIn. And he had me do a quick little 30-second blurb on what we could do right now to get through this. And I think everybody's learning it. And that's just lean on one another. I mean, this is a time when we're in an unprecedented event, in that the entire globe is bonding together to fight basically an enemy, and that's this pandemic. And we've never been together like this. Granted, we're socially distant, but we are all together in this fight. We may not be able to physically get together, but lean on one another through calling one another, Zooming with one another. For those that you do live with, lean on them and open up to them. Share what it is you're feeling. Because I'm sure you are feeling things you have never felt before: frustration, fatigue, stress, anxiety, uncertainty, or at least not in these particular ways. You haven't felt these before. So share that, and sharing that is important. Share it and lean on one another. That's it.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. And I think we'll close it out with that. If
Great.
you think this will be helpful for someone that's listening, or someone that should be listening, please, I encourage you to share this with them. Even if they don't subscribe. Of course, I'd love some subscribers, but I think this would be beneficial to a lot of people right now. Super impactful conversation. And with that, until next time.